Welcome to another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics that write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, a serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs, and currently I'm teaching entrepreneurship at Vinh University in Hanoi, Vietnam. Today's guest is Steve Van Valin, author of The Search for Meaning at Work: Unleashing the Hidden Power of Purpose to Engage and Fulfill Your Workforce. Steve, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Mark. What a pleasure to be with you. Really appreciate it.
Well, it's so nice to have somebody from Philadelphia because I'm interviewing people all over the world, but I have a special place for Philadelphia, and I'm so glad to have you on today.
Excellent. Yeah, well, we have we're brothers in more ways than just the locality then.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Steve, let's start off with you telling us about your professional background, how you got to where you're at right now.
Yeah, so my background is really in sales and marketing and the whole idea of how to think like customers with branding. That was sort of my deeper background that led me to QVC, the shopping network. And I was able to lead the culture at QVC for I guess, over 14 years, and just fell in love with the whole discipline of shaping a culture, working with different leaders and coaching executives on how to be more effective with their team. And I guess, Mark, one of the things I'm most proud about that whole experience is that we did it at all levels. Like worked with people on third shifts that were driving forklifts in warehouses, all the way up to the president of the organization. And so I fell in love with the whole idea of culture and launched Culturology as my own personal practice and consultancy. And have had many clients in a variety of verticals. Most of them, I'd say, if there was one common thing, they all have a real bent on customer service, like using customer service or their customer focus as kind of their own unique brand differentiator. And I think that's where culture really has the most traction in a lot of ways to make a difference in performance. And
I,
and I wrote this book about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, to really put together, the challenge that people were facing on lacking meaning at work and motivation. And we keep seeing the engagement scores out there going down every single year for the past 3 years through Gallup. And so I wanted to explore sort of an uncharted territory here of how purpose and meaning are connected and what we can do as managers to really influence that and drive engagement in our organizations.
before we get into all the different chapters of what you wrote, I'm wondering, during the pandemic, people were able to work from home. And one of the key drivers of people working from home were people under 35 who liked this idea of working from home, or people who were older and had parents to take care of. But now all the companies are in America, because in Asia, as soon as they can go back to work, the companies insisted they go back. There was no work from home here, that you had to go back. So, how is that changing corporate cultures and the way people view their company now that companies are basically saying, this whole era of you working from wherever you want to is now over. You got to come back. What's your take
Yeah.
on that?
Yeah, I mean, remote work has been an incredible challenge to galvanize a culture, to really get people to know each other. I think that's the biggest difference is we just don't know each other at that personal level as much anymore if we're remote. And so the companies that are and organizations that are setting themselves apart are going purposely after the idea of building relationships with each other, knowing that it'll never be the same as hanging around the break room or the water cooler or before the meeting in the room, but they're doing it purposefully to try to stem the tide on people just feeling like they're mercenaries at work and feeling sort of alone. And I think the remote work has caused you see the difference in engagement scores across Gallup, for example, as a result of the impact of that. People like it. but in terms of culture and having real unified teams, not as strong.
Yeah, I don't understand how you can build uh, a corporate culture if there's nobody in the corporation.
Yeah, I mean, you have to sort of reset your expectations on what it can be. And if you've experienced working with people for decades, like most of us have, then it's very disappointing. And then you have the new generations who are maybe coming out of school who have never experienced culture at its ideal form, who really don't have any inkling for what it could be or what's the big deal about this culture thing. I'm just assigned my work, I go and I do it, and I have a relationship with my boss and a few others on the team, and that's good enough. So it is very tough to put it in the context of what its potential really can be.
Yeah, I in Asia, part of the culture is actually getting together with people after work and doing things together, and everything is very team oriented here. I'm actually amazed in Asia how well everybody gets along on a team. Unlike us being in the US, where we're very individualistic, they're very team oriented here. And that doesn't mean they lose their personality, it's just that they're extremely team oriented. In chapter one, you write, why do you believe so many engagement initiatives fail to address the core meaning and purpose when it comes to culture?
Yeah, I think the idea of purpose at work almost feels too large for a lot of people, and they can't get their arms around it, or they think they can't get their arms around it. And they also think of purpose as being just a singular thing, like the purpose statement that the HR department comes up with. And I think it comes down to, and this is what I wrote a lot about in the book, was sort of debunking the idea of purpose being a singular thing and thinking about purpose as a multitasking thing. And in other words, I have a purpose uh, to accomplish this afternoon in my work. I have a purpose to accomplish by the end of the week. I have a purpose in my relationship with Marc Kramer. It's like, so when we start thinking about how purpose is ever present in all our relationships and then the tasks that we do, then it becomes relevant and people can get their arms around it. So that's part of what I debunked in terms of thinking it through as a multitasking purpose, and that sets up more opportunities for people to go after it, which is a really good thing. And that's where meaning comes in.
I mean, many of the polls that I've seen show that 73% of people or higher are unhappy with what they do on a day-to-day basis. And I read that people care more about what you just talked about, purpose, than they care about salary. Money's important, but it falls way behind purpose. So, how can companies feel people uh, have people feel more purpose, where they feel that the money does become it's relevant, but not at the top of why they choose to stay somewhere and help them grow.
Well, I guess at the very baseline of the experience at work, it's all about the self-satisfaction of what you're getting out of it. Am I passionate for this? Do I feel like people are leveraging the knowledge that I have? Are they giving me the respect as a human being to let me flourish at work, to produce fruit in a way? And so that's the opportunity, is really the at the very ground level of self-satisfaction. Now that's just one of the 11 amplifiers that I identified in the book. But I think that's the one that a lot of people forget about oftentimes, is just, hey, can I ask people's opinions on how to be more effective at their work? That simple question right there will light up a person's idea of purpose and meaning. I'm contributing, I am making progress towards something. And so just the simple act of asking people their opinions sets them in that mode of feeling meaning in the work that they're doing.
Can you share a story where a lack of meaning directly impacted engagement in a workplace?
Well, there's there's so many positive ones. I guess the negative ones that I can think of right now, like a real contemporary one that we're seeing in real time, is think about the war between Russia and Ukraine. And don't want to get political here, but Ukraine, vastly outnumbered, being attacked by, one of the largest armies in the entire world, able to stand and fight with a level of commitment that's unbelievable. The fact that they were able to deter this huge army is because they had a purpose in doing so. Whereas this other vast army, and I don't can't climb inside the minds of all the soldiers, but they can't possibly feel the same level of meaning and purpose in the work that they're doing to fight this awful war that's going on. So I think there you see the juxtaposition of performance based on the purpose that those two armies are feeling for themselves.
What's the most telling signs that meaning is missing in an organization?
Well, probably that they start imposing their own rules to create meaning, and they inadvertently become very parochial. And then all of a sudden, you see people breaking rules. So, and that becomes sort of the toxic symptom of a organization that's lacking purpose and meaning. You also see a lot of people sniping behind each other's backs and having sort of their own turf wars with each other. That's my responsibility, not yours. This is mine, yours. And then I guess on a more practical sense, in some organizations, you would see safety issues coming into consideration where people aren't taking the extra time to be safe in what they're doing. And we've seen so many industrial accidents, over the past couple of years. You can see how that comes to bear. People need to be engaged to be extra diligent about integrity of safety.
In chapter 2, how did you identify and validate the 11 amplifiers of meaning in your research and consulting? And explain what you don't have to tell us all 11, but explain what those are and why they're important.
Yeah, so when Dr. Teresa Amabile, she's the head of research at Harvard Business School, when she identified what she calls the progress principle, which is people making progress against meaningful work as this incredible springboard of performance, of engagement leading to performance. And so when I started diving deeply into this idea of, well, what is it that gives people meaning? Now, we understand the idea of making progress, but what gives people meaning? I stepped back and thought of the holistic experience of work, the full experience of work, and thought about it from the most granular things that happen minute to minute, day to day, calling that self-satisfaction, and then thinking about the ones that radiate out from that, the relationship that I might have with my work partner, how my family feels about my work. Am I honoring my family with the work I'm doing? Do I feel like I'm part of a team? The manager is a humongous amplifier of meaning themselves. And then we start getting a little bit bigger in terms of broader influence, the department that you're in, and the company itself and your relationship with customers. And then I have a number of amplifiers that I call the altruistic amplifiers, things like how we benefit the community, how the work that I do maybe even has a societal impact. And then the last of the amplifiers, which may be the not the most powerful, but the biggest one of all in terms of its time expression, is spirituality. Is the work that I'm doing helping me fulfill my ultimate destiny or my calling as a human being? So that's kind of a very holistic view of it. And Dr. Amabile from Harvard loved this idea and it jived with the research that they did from the progress principle. If anybody's ever read Viktor Frankl's work, Man's Search for Meaning, it coordinates with that, as well as another piece of research from Dan Pink in his book Drive that was highly influential in getting me excited about this subject to begin with. So those 11 amplifiers have nuances to them, and each one is a little bit different for each person. And that makes us all unique on what really gives us purpose and meaning in our life. And knowing that gives us choices on how we can influence people.
How can managers assess which amplifiers are most important to their teams?
Yeah, I mean, how about having a candid conversation with them? This is something we don't schedule in our status meeting, right? Let's talk about what's meaningful to you at work. Um, so you might have a hard conversation around that if you didn't have structure with it. But if you looked at the 11 different amplifiers that I provide, and actually there's questions in the book on how to ask your employee where they are with these items. To what extent are they self-satisfied at work? To what extent do they feel supported by me as their manager or leader? And so I think all of us probably these will be some of the best, deepest, richest conversations we'll ever have with employees if we bother to sit down and do it. And they will respect you tremendously for taking the time or caring that much. And here's the other magic thing, Mark, with that conversation is you as a manager or leader, you want to share what it is for you as well. It's not just like, what is it for you? Here's what it is for me as well. And you find this common ground together, and it can be a really magical conversation that can break through that relationship.
What impact is AI having on it? Because I've talked to managers now who are strategizing about how best to lead their people by having conversations with different AI platforms.
Well, I don't know that I have all the answers with it yet. I'd like to, AI stands for obviously artificial intelligence. I like to think of AI in my world as authentic interactions. And I think the more we use artificial intelligence, the more we're going to have to balance it as human beings and also for application on how does that change the equation of the authentic interactions I'm having with people or my customers. If we're leaning too much on AI, the first AI, then we'll never get the other, we'll never fully be able to implement it, and we'll never fully be able to take advantage of it unless we think about it still from the human perspective. So we're seeing that play out right now, obviously.
In chapter 3 about self-satisfaction amplifiers, what are the most effective ways leaders can foster self-satisfaction among employees?
Well, think about this for yourself. Maybe could even harken back to the first job that you had. And maybe it was a low level job. You're just, it's an hourly job. Imagine if your manager or supervisor comes to you and says, "Hey, Steve," or "Hey, Mark, like, tell me how you think you can be more effective doing this work." Or what are we doing around here that seems like a stupid rule that's implemented for no good reason? And after the person picks themselves off the floor when shocked that, the manager would ask them such a great question, they have an opportunity to share their mind. And this is the meaningful thing that works at all levels. It doesn't, it could be the intern who just started asking their opinion about it will change the equation of them feeling respected. So to me, self-satisfaction sort of starts with the idea of respect. and asking people's opinions. By the way, you're going to learn some great data right from the field. So I would if I had to just isolate one thing to do that, and I have a second one as well, but I would go for asking, being relentless on asking people what their thoughts are about the business that they're in.
How do small daily interactions contribute or detract from self-satisfaction at work?
Well, I think we have to know whether or not any particular task that we're doing, do we enjoy the challenge or not? And as managers, we can't just give people all the things that they just want to do. There's things that they have to do on top of it. But I think the way we can flip the script on this one is identifying whether or not them accomplishing a small task leads to a small win. So how do you know if it's leading to a small win? It has to be a goal that's been identified. So when you're talking to people about the work they're doing, it always needs to be, or it always should be in the context of, if we're able to do this, it's going to help us nail this particular thing that's driving us crazy as a team, or that we need to get done by Friday. Does it lead to a small win? Um, so that connects even the smallest task to a purpose. Again, that whole idea of multitasking purpose.
In chapter 4, the family amplifier, why is the family amplifier often underestimated in workplace motivation? And explain what that means, family amplifier.
Well, when you ask people, and I've done this many, many times, like, why do you, so maybe people on this call can do this for themselves. Ask people on your team, hey, why do you work so hard? What's the real purpose behind you being, this incredible professional that you are? Why do you work so hard? And they'll pause, they'll look up, they'll think about it, and they'll go, it's because of my family. I'm doing this work. Now, maybe they don't have a family, a nuclear family, but they're doing it for the future of them living with people or even friends, right? They'll always say that. So that's one thing. It always plays a part in achieving this family goal. The other thing, too, is what's the most common thing that we exchange with our family members during the day? How's your day going? Or how was your day? We're texting, how's it going there? So the family is actually the feedback mechanism as to how you view work, because you're saying, I'm having a really crappy day. These people are all a bunch of turkeys. My boss just, was an idiot again. And these are the things that get played out through our family. So if you say, I'm having a great day, Mark, my boss, has been wonderful. We got another really cool project going on. Then the family member, your significant other, goes, wow, that's great. So this plays a part in so many things because it's getting reinforced about your experience and how engaged you are, how meaningful the work is. But it's also a really wonderful defense mechanism when the recruiter calls and says, "Hey, I've got a great job for another $20,000." And you go to your significant other and they go, "You're not leaving that job. You like it there. Like this is a place like you can't do that. It's not worth it." So that's a retention strategy to pull in the family.
Is there any particular family businesses that you're impressed with that do this well?
Well, I don't know that it has to be a family business. Um, I think families are really loyal to each other. They're also incredibly dysfunctional. When I go in and work with an organization and they say our culture is like a family, I always sort of look at them and go, okay, that's good and, you know, troublesome.
Yeah.
Because yeah, because we can be pretty harsh with each other. I love the radical candor that family members have for each other. Like that's a wonderful thing. But you don't necessarily want it to be a family organization. The context of the family for me in this whole idea of amplifying meaning is that that's why we're working. And you know, the extrinsic rewards of making money are getting translated into intrinsic value that I'm applying with my world, my family. You know, even if somebody says, "Oh, I'm making a lot of money so I can buy a shore house down in New Jersey." Well, why do you want that? It's so you can spend time with your family and loved ones. So that's an intrinsic piece. So I think once managers and leaders understand that, actually opens up new opportunities and conversations for them to engage people in empathetic ways they never thought possible. And if people aren't sure about it, ask themselves, why are you working so hard? And do a gut check on it.
How can organizations respectfully acknowledge and support employees' family priorities? I mean, everybody, especially under the age of 35, because I've got two of them, two girls, they're all worried about work-life balance.
Yeah. Such a difficult question. I don't know if I have one, panacea answer, here for you on that. I think the more we know about a person's family, the more that we can understand and make adjustments on the fly for whether or not they have to go see the Little League game or they have an elderly family member living with them who's going through health issues, that we can instantly make the right decision for them or at least talk it through in ways. If we have to say no, at least we understand the ramifications of that. It's the people who don't understand the ramifications who come across as cold and uncaring. And people go, I'm out of here. I got to go somewhere where I can at least live my life. So,
What are some creative ways you've seen companies involve families in recognition or engagement efforts?
so this happened to me personally, which blew me away. My son had just graduated from college, got a great job with an SEO agency called Sear Interactive here in
Oh,
Philadelphia.
sure. I know Will.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so this was probably his brilliant idea. But on Mother's Day, the doorbell rings. There's a person at the door with a bouquet of flowers, and the note in it is from Sear Interactive, and it's for my wife. And it's like, I just want to thank you for being a great mother to your son Ryan. We love having him as an employee. Now, we were blown away by that. First of all, they made the connection, but he's a young man, he's living at home. Who's still influencing his thought process and engagement level at work? Us. So on Father's Day, ding dong rings. There's a gigantic box of cookies. They must know me really well. Same thing, a note about like thank you for being a great dad. It's obviously shows up in Ryan's, work ethic or something like that. So these are just some of the creative things, like when you think about engaging the family and helping to be an advocate for the work itself, that you can start thinking about and playing with, and very harmless things. The other is, Mark, if I was going to give, let's say, $100, instead of just giving $100 gift certificate as recognition to a person, give them two tickets to a concert, or if you know what their favorite restaurant is to go together as a couple, give them restaurant gift certificates so they can enjoy it together. Because that becomes a story that then gets proliferated. And again, it's the support. When the recruiter calls, you'd be like, are you crazy? These people, we love them.
In chapter 5, the work partner amplifier, what makes work partnerships so powerful in driving meaning and performance?
Yeah, so This amplifier called the work partner was me identifying the fact that almost all of us, no matter what our role, there's usually like one or two, maybe three key people that are synapses for getting work done. They're the person that you're on the phone with 3 or 4 times a day, not just once a week on a status call, texting each other, checking in with each other. So those relationships are the key to driving performance in an organization. If you can get those relationships with those, what I call them work partners, they may officially have a different title in your organization. If you can get those relationships really wired in together, it'll lead to great performance. And it plays off the simple psychology that I never want to leave, I never want to let you down. If we have equity in our relationship together, I don't want to, I never want to leave you short. I always want to do the best for my work partner. It's kind of that foxhole mentality piece. Like I'd never leave a man in the foxhole. I'm going to continue to fight for them.
So, what's your take on what happens to the culture when there's major downsizings as the federal government's going through? I just read this today. There's another 1,500 people from the State Department being let go.
Wow.
How's that all shake out in terms of how people view the job and the organization when they've given so much to the organization and now their lives are upended?
Yeah. Well, it's really like a death in the family, isn't it? Because we've lost the equity of those relationships in some cases. We've worked really hard to establish trust with each other, and we have an emotional bond with those people, and then all of a sudden they're gone. And yeah, it's quite traumatic. I would say for any organization who's gone through that, it's kind of like you got to go back to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, stages of death and dying almost, and acknowledge it and get to the point of, acceptance eventually, but then start over fresh with building relationships with people. And they may never trust you as an organization in the same way that, prior to the huge layoff, but you can get some foothold back. And the relationships are always so personal that it doesn't have to be about the organization anymore. It can be about the relationship that you and I have.
How can managers facilitate the development of strong work partnership relationships and do it in an authentic way?
Um, well, I guess two things. Involve the work partners. If you're going to hire somebody new, involve the work partner in actually being part of the interview process. That will help a lot because they'll have equity in having made that decision for this new person coming onto the team. But the other suggestion I'd make is build a coaching rich environment between those players. Teach them what it means to be able to coach each other with radical candor and to be able to brainstorm and problem solve together. So those are the skills that they will need and sort of the attitudinal approach that'll help them work through the tough times and the differences in opinions that they're naturally going to have. So different styles and everything. Yeah.
What are the key ingredients to fostering a true sense of belonging within a team?
Well, aren't there a lot of books at Barnes and Noble on this one? But like you wonder like why haven't we totally gotten it right, right? Um,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think
people talk about, I mean, even leadership organizations, especially like at universities, that we teach that, but we don't, I think very few universities actually do it.
I think the key where I see it really working, Mark, is when leaders are incredibly clear on what I'd call we are in it together. We are in this battle together. Okay, that works for sports teams especially, but it works for business teams as well. And in order to be in it together, you actually have to create an adversary. So, who is the adversary that your team is going up against? Should be the competition, or it should be just maybe the gravity of the challenge that you face. Rolling out AI or implementing AI effectively and doing the changeover for that. That's your adversary. But if we have an adversary, we also need a vision for what winning looks like. What does it look like? We're in this together. We're in this together. Here's our adversary. Here's what winning looks like. That creates a purpose. And then making progress toward that winning together is what we get the emotional response of meaning from.
We have a question from the audience. Do you
Yeah.
see generational differences in how much people are willing to commit to the company? And I think that's a great question because my daughter is going to be 35 and she complains about the 20-something-year-olds not willing to make that kind of commitment.
Well, it goes back to an earlier question too, like people that have experienced remote work only, they don't they don't have a sense of commitment typically to the organization because they don't have as much emotional equity involved in the people of the organization. So that's really hard. Um, my generation, in fact, I can still do this to this day. If I go out and I'm speaking to a large group, I'll say, "How many of you are married to somebody that you work with?" And you'll see an unbelievable number of hands go up. And guess what? That's worked for me as well. I married somebody who I was in my department, and we both reported to the same boss. So you just don't see that now anymore. So that there's a little, the whole societal experience of work is very different, which changes the level of commitment. I also think that the thing going on, like talking about the layoffs earlier, is that people realize often that the company has no loyalty toward them necessarily.
I think
And
that's a huge problem today.
yeah, and they're not naive about that anymore. Um, Millennials and Gen Z have heard their parents talk about that around the dinner table for years now, so they came out of school not expecting it at all. I think, boomers um, and Xers, they had idealism that was shattered. So I'm making it sound all bad, right? But here's an important point related to that for the person asking the question. Don't worry about the loyalty to the company as much as the loyalty to the local culture. So I like using the expression with my clients that all culture is local. So it really comes down more of an impact to the immediate team that you're with. That's why I have them as amplifiers as opposed to just working on company purpose. Company purpose is really important, but in the end, it comes down to the local culture that you're in and the relationships that you have. That's way more important. I have a
Uh,
commitment to them, not necessarily the company.
right, yeah, because they're friends, they've developed a rapport.
Yes.
A question from the audience. It's been a tough time for Israeli companies over the past few years, and we've seen an incredible sense of purpose in Israeli companies that we are in this battle together and
Mm.
have to deliver no matter what adversity we face. They bridge the generational differences well. What can American businesses learn from that example we've seen about purpose in the Israeli ventures?
Wow, great question. Yeah, when I think about the American economy during World War II, Rosie the Riveter, and
Yeah.
just the whole idea of realizing that it was so obvious, it was on the surface as to why you're building this thing, to defend off the Nazis or Like it was so obvious and the purpose was so clear. That's why we were incredibly productive and had the monumental achievements that we were able to do. So back to the question, like what can American companies learn from that? Well, if we're not going to have it from the most grandiose perspective of survival that the Israelis obviously feel for themselves, what is it that you can do to bring it down to a more manageable level that's more relevant for people? And it may not have that deep level of passion to it, but what's the common thread? That's a rhetorical question for you to think through. What's the common thread that everyone would agree upon that's worth fighting this battle for, called work?
Another question from the audience. How can a high-tech company managers design meetings that matter in a high-velocity environment without sacrificing innovation, time, or employee autonomy, balancing structure, meaning, and agility?
Well, if the meeting is really important, what rules do you need to apply to the meeting and structure to get the most out of it? So, did you ever notice that people talk too long now on Zoom calls? Um, I'm probably talking too long because I'm like so zoomed out in a way, but have rules that are kind of fun that challenge people to say what they're going to say in just one sentence, for example. Or I've worked with organizations on what you call Jeopardy. You can only ask questions, and it has to be one question. You can only ask questions in the meeting. Now, you may want to try that for a while, but what it does is it changes the mindset for people in the meetings that, hey, we're not just going to go through the same old routine, same as it ever was, but we're actually going to change things up a little bit. Maybe we're actually going to have a little bit of fun with this. Maybe it's going to bring out the really highly creative introvert that's never found a way to break through, the airtime of the group. So thinking through that way. I did put in my book it's called a 1 hour virtual problem solver, and it's a format for conducting a brainstorming session in 1 hour where you go through every aspect of it, identifying the problem, identifying the questions, brainstorming, sorting it through, and then eventually coming up with the accountabilities and who's going to walk out of the room and what are they going to do when. So it's very structured. Um, People actually like this. You would think, oh gosh, this sounds like kindergarten or something where it's so parochial. But people like it and they like trying things like that. Because guess what? Next week you're going to have the same old boring meeting, the same people talking, unless you try something different.
Another question from the audience. The workday and culture are more defined about the work, leveraging and maximizing one's strengths, assuming that the company aligns with one's own ethos. Working in a remote environment, as long as it's not isolating and one can have access to relationships in and outside of work. Daniel Pink's uh, Daniel Pink's drive thesis around autonomy, mastery, purpose is probably easier to fulfill. So, what's your take on that?
Yeah, what was the first part of that question? I'm sorry, Mark. That
It's all right. The workday and culture are more defined about work leveraging and maximizing one's strengths.
yeah. I mean, do we know what each other's strengths are? I mean, how am I going to leverage your strengths unless we have a conversation about it? Again,
Or
this
you
is
see
some
them.
right. You see them in action when they're letting their hair down, right? Then you see the real passion, or you see the real frustrations that would let you know what's not their strength. So to operationalize that, you're going to have a conversation around it. So the idea of getting to know people virtually, um, I put together a virtual team player playbook. It's actually in the book, but it covers those things that are your strengths and it gives you a chance to talk about it openly together as a team. There's 32 questions, I believe. So if you cover one question every week, you'll do it twice a year. We go have everybody on the team share, and some of the questions are really provocative and fun, not like what's your favorite color or your favorite toy, those are icebreakers, but more specific like, oh wow, I know this about Mark. Now I can adjust how I'm speaking his language or not. So check that out in the book, Virtual Team Player Playbook. I think that's a way you can leverage strengths.
Another question from the audience. How can high-tech company managers design meetings that matter in high velocity environment without sacrificing innovation time or employee autonomy, balancing structure, meaning, and agility?
Yeah, I think maybe they asked that before. High highs high velocity companies. Let's just talk about that for a second. How long are your average meetings? An hour? Why? Because it's convenient to plug it in to Zoom or Teams or whatever you're using. Make meetings 10 minutes long. Solve one problem at a time. Ask one provocative question. Have people answer in one sentence or two and go back and do a quick summary of it. And if you have to meet again for 10 minutes at 4 o'clock, do it. But we have to shake this up a little bit because while we're in those meetings, we're not actually doing the actual grinding of the work that we need to do. So we got to make them super efficient. So, I mean, this is the whole, Mark, I know you're an expert in agile. It's that whole idea of doing it quickly, 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 and moving through making progress. When we feel like we're making progress, guess what? We're going to be engaged or going to be more innovative.
I find that when I have my students do a project in an hour, they come up with the best ideas. The PowerPoints are amazing to me, that they're able, I give them as a challenge and I ask them 5 questions, say you have to put this in a PowerPoint presentation. And in 45 minutes to an hour, they've done some very, very good thinking. I'm always amazed at the quality of this. A question from the audience. The workday and culture are more defined about the work leveraging and maximizing one's strengths. Assuming the company aligns with one's own ethos, working in a remote environment, as long as there's no isolating, one can have access to relationships in and outside. This relates to Dan Pink's drive theory around autonomy. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I love Dan Pink's work, Autonomy, Mastery, and Purpose, right?
Yeah.
So, um, sometimes we maybe feel too obligated to come up with the answers ourselves. And I'm going to be a wise guy here, and I'm going to say, why don't you ask them? Why don't you ask your team members how they could kick it up a notch? Now, here's something magical that happens as a result of you doing that. Number one, you've asked them a question. So it shows that you respect and care about the answer. Number two, you're empowering them to think it through for themselves. And that's also a respectful gesture. Number three, you're going to come up with real practical stuff that they would buy into off the bat. So if you follow that formula, ask the question, see what kind of empowerment you get as a result of it, and then allow them to own it. I think that follows Dan Pink beautifully in so many ways.
I have to thank the audience for so many good questions. We appreciate their questions for sure, and we're glad that they ask them, and we invite more of them. In chapter 7, the manager amplifier, what are the most common misconceptions managers have about their influence on meaning?
Yeah, this is an easy one. Managers do not seem to understand how much they personally play a role in engagement. And I'm talking about their direct relationship with the employee. And they try to separate themselves from from the equation of the experience of work and just think about work. So, and people can gut check themselves on this one too, Mark, by thinking about their boss and how much do you want to actually please your boss? Managers never understand this, that people are trying really, really hard to get you to be happy, to get your acknowledgement that you're a brilliant person, that you're smart, and that you make a difference. They want that so desperately. So that's managers don't seem to understand that, and they have to sort of go introspective on the relationship they have with their manager, and they go, "Oh, yeah, I guess you're right." So as a result of that, there's a whole lot of things you should do differently. I've outlined in my book, but if I only had to pick one, Mark, to share with the group, it would be to appreciate them when they exhibit high level of discretionary effort. In other words, when you knew that they had choices that they were making on how to approach a project or how they dealt with a customer or how they're, solving a code problem or whatever, and you realized that they took a high level of discretion, they made a great choice on the effort, not just the outcome, even the effort, and you can play that back to them, they will go over the moon for that. We've all had managers that we would run through a wall for that had this sense of advocacy, like they're our advocates. They want the best for us. And once that relationship is described like as an advocate relationship, it's a game changer. When I ask groups of people when I do a talk, how many of you have either an advocate boss or an antagonist boss? If the bosses aren't in the room, most of the hands will go up with a boss that's an antagonist, or at least half, which is heartbreaking. So how do you cross that line? You show them that you recognize the amazing work. You catch them doing things right. It's a cliche, but it comes down to thinking empathetically with great emotional intelligence. What are they doing? How did that make an impact? By the way, I don't just want to store it up here. I want to say it to them.
How big an organization was QVC at its height when you were there?
Yeah, so we had 10,000 employees and we were a $10 billion company and we were global. We had uh, the UK, France, Italy, Germany, and eventually launched in China.
So my question is, how much does a CEO, when that in that large an organization, actually affect culture? Because as you mentioned before, all politics is local, that the manager you work for, and rarely do you hear people complain about the CEO unless they report to them. They don't feel like there's even any connection with the CEO. Many people who work in large organizations feel the CEO is overpaid and doesn't provide that much value. So how much really does the CEO affect corporate culture?
I think they have an opportunity to be highly influential. I would agree with you that most, a lot are not. They're just not good articulators of the messaging. Maybe they don't have the right coaching to be able to share that. But the ones that are constantly reminding people, saying it, I had a boss that used to say it 7 times, 7 ways, 7 times, like just the same message 7 ways, 7 times to get it through, to be relentless on the values that the organization has, the recognition that our people are working their tails off. And then what is this all leading to? To be able to actually come down and humanize it, to say we want you and to be successful with your families, we want you to to have money that allows you the freedom to not be stressed when the mortgage bill arrives. Like, people just don't talk like that typically, but the ones that humanize it, I mean, think about the entity they've created. It's like its own community in and of itself that's driving the economy. They don't necessarily talk about that. So the best CEOs that are influencing culture are relentless with the messaging. They connect everything to the values that they've established, and they're not shy about laying down the challenge on why all this matters and how that can have an influence on the people's lives that are actually doing the work. So there's so many other things I could share there, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Um, how can department leaders create distinct culture that amplifies meaning even within a large organization? So that's kind of what we were just talking about now. How can they make that happen? And I mean, I've even seen at other places I've been where the culture is different department to department, leader to leader of those departments.
Yeah. Be positively competitive with the other departments. Let's say you're in the customer service department, that you want to raise your standards so high that you can go into the senior management team meeting and brag about the work that your team is doing, and then be able to share with the department members the fact that you bragged about how the work that your team is doing. So, why would you want to be competitive? Because it's all driving toward the bigger purpose for the company. So it's being positively competitive, friendly competition, not backstabbing. So the way you do that is by having very specific goals for your organization that cascade to the company purpose.
So, this is my last question.
Yeah.
Uh, and right now, there has been a de-emphasizing of diversity and inclusion. And it's been mostly this administration has been pushing it, but a lot of people weren't happy with diversity and inclusion and felt it actually may have been reversed, that a lot of other people were left out. So, how are companies still integrating, which is important, diversity and inclusion? Because all Harvard studies show that the companies that do focus on this have an enormous rate of return on these things. So, where do things stand now in corporate cultures related to it? And how should companies continue to have this as one of their key focuses?
Well, in my opinion, where this went wrong was cultures that lost their ability to have radical candor with each other on the inside. That they became too afraid. Fear is still the number one motivator. Okay. They became afraid to make waves or to challenge things. And there's just too many examples that we've all seen where, somebody running to HR for this and that and the other thing misconstrued, where it was just too dangerous in a way to stick your head out of the foxhole. And that's you have to do that in order to be innovative. You have to challenge people. And so I think where that went wrong was when people started losing radical candor on it. The whole idea with diversity and inclusion was a wonderful thing with innovation when it was about getting different types of styles and minds in the room and including, like when I did brainstorming sessions at QVC, we had high-level managers and leaders, but I would also invite department assistants to come there because they saw the underworkings and they always had incredible ideas to offer. That was the inclusion piece. And what happened was it became politicized and became something different than that, which created its own sense of fear. So I would just ask people sort of rhetorically, is your program adding to the sense of being honest and open with each other and driving innovation from a real diverse and inclusive perspective? Or is it causing people to go into reserve mode and holding back?
Steve, I can tell why you did such a good job at QVC and why your clients love you. I so appreciate the time of talking to us today. I very much enjoyed your book, and it's very timely because people are really worried about corporate culture and, and how to pick the right culture for themselves to join, and entrepreneurs who think about what kind of cultures can I build that are going to last for the long term. So thank you so much for taking the time and talking about this.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Mark, for all the incredible work you're doing to make a difference. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next Friday. Take care.